All right. I wanted to talk about a few things today. Like most people, I'm very discouraged and saddened by state of affairs that are going on in the Middle East. Been confused at times, trying to make sense of it all, and obviously observing everything that's being said in the media and trying to talk about it, educate myself, and learn from others while keeping an open mind, and trying to be impartial as much as possible. I definitely recognize I have my own biases. Being a Muslim definitely impacts which way I lean. But at the same time, as a father and a brother, a son, a human in this world, I struggle to make sense of all the the deaths that are taking place, and there's no regard or recognition for a human life. It's being swept under the rug of defense and termed collateral damage, which since when did human life become collateral damage for our own selfish gains? So, anyways, I did want to be very objective and talk through some facts. I wanted to share some literature that I've come across and make sense of all of this. So I've taken some notes that I want to go through, but I do want to highlight one book first, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Ironically, he's a Israeli writer and was part of the Israeli military in the 1954s. In the 1950s. And in the description of the book, they talk about Kahneman shows where we can and cannot trust our intuitions and how we can tap into the benefits of slow thinking. He offers practical and enlightening insights into how we can use different techniques to guard against the mental glitches that often get us into trouble. I really enjoyed reading this book. I read it more than 2 years ago, but it talks about how people's biases can get in the way and how media sometimes, or reporters, or even like researchers, will present data in a way that can elicit certain responses. One of the examples he uses is, if you were to say 5% of the population versus 1 in 20, people have a different response. And the reason why I bring this up is constantly in the media, the one thing I've heard everyone say is, this is the worst thing that's happened to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Now, let's just talk numbers rather than getting the emotional response coming up. So, and I'm not undermining the lives of anyone. My main message here is to understand how the data is being presented. So 6 million people were killed in the Holocaust, and then we don't know how many more were imprisoned. And there's obviously post-traumatic stress disorder that happens from that. But let's stick to the 6 million number for now, for argument's sake. And on October 7th, it's been reported that 1,500 people were killed. And we don't even know if that was all the Jewish people of Israel. But even if we stick with that number, that's 0.025% of 6 million. Whereas the Palestinian deaths are getting close to 20,000. That's a bigger number, but we don't talk about that. We sweep it under the rug and say it's collateral damage. Israel is doing what it needs to do to defend itself. So that's just one piece I wanted to highlight. The other piece is the whole October 7th piece. Conveniently, people are starting a timeline when it suits their argument, right? So if we're going to have a proper full-on debate or informed discussion, we need to consider information holistically. We can't just draw a line that works for us and say, oh, anything that happened before that doesn't matter. That's typical gaslighting. I know people throw this term around because it's so trendy and don't apply it in the right context. They'll apply it in their relationships. But this is gaslighting, saying, hey, We get to decide where we draw the line, and that's when we start talking. Irrespective of what happened in 1940, what happened before that, let's draw this line, and then we'll have an argument. That is problematic to me. And then another piece I wanted to share, I hope I can find the page here, just bear with me. I should have been a bit more prepared, but so this is actually, I'm going through a book, 10 Global Trends Every Smart Person Should Know. This is a book actually right that I heard about through one of Jordan Peterson's lectures for people that don't know him. I'll be talking about him as well shortly in this video. But what I'm trying to find is in this book, they reference the definition of a genocide. So I think I'm pretty close here. Okay, sorry, I had to pause that just to find it. But yeah, this is on page 87 of the book, like I said, 10 global trends. So they defined, here it is, after the Holocaust, it was in response to the Holocaust that the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide outlawed genocide in 1948, and defined it as acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethical, racial, or religious group. So one of the arguments I've seen, especially on Piers Morgan, is he keeps arguing that it's not a genocide because it's not all of Palestine. But here, the National United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment defined it as in whole or in part. So by definition, this is a genocide. So this is where, and the funny thing is, it was the Holocaust that preempted this. So this is where I struggle. The other piece, if I go flip a page where they're talking about trends in the battle death rate declining after the Vietnam War, it was said that, the Vietnam War was the first war in which gruesome images of mangled bodies and obliterated villages and cities were broadcast nightly into millions of homes. Since then, televised war reporting has only become more pervasive. At the war in Southeast Asia ground on, Americans and their allies became less willing to accept high death tolls from conflicts abroad. Other analysts argue that failing fertility rates mean that parents become more protective of the few children they have. So again, Americans and their allies became less willing to accept high death tolls. I don't know if I need to say more on that front. Yes, so coming to Mr. Jordan Peterson. So with this, I'm very conflicted because I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson's. He's done tremendous, he's had a tremendous influence on my growth and journey, but I have to call a spade a spade. In one of his videos, back when he was doing his lectures out of University of Toronto, he got a lot of heat from the Muslim population, but he went on record to say, and he called Prophet Muhammad, peace be and blessings upon him, a warlord. A warlord. So he really had to take a few steps back on that and apologize. In fact, Muhammad Hijab was on his podcast, I believe a couple years ago, and also called him out on that. But on October 7th or somewhere after that, Jordan Peterson, for most people that know, went on his Twitter account and basically said, give them hell, calling for a war. So again, I don't know if I need to say much beyond that, but this is an influential man who is talking to very powerful people on a daily basis with politicians, and he's saying stuff like this. So again, we need to be very, very mindful of what's being said out there. Oh, here's the other angle that's being taken that I've noticed. So because of like ventures like Daily Wire, and it's no secret, Ben Shapiro is a Jewish man, and he's obviously spoken out about this war, and he's gone on record as saying these people, the Palestinians, should be killed. So the Daily Wire is known as a right-wing kind of conservative channel, and that's why Jordan Peterson's been working for them. But one of the angles I'm seeing now taken by, for example, Man Shapiro, is they're making this a right-wing versus left-wing battle. They're saying the people that are supporting the Palestinians are the woke mob. And again, they're trying to elicit this response from a certain group of people who have right-wing ideologies or political views, to get them to turn against what's going on. And Jordan Peterson also released a blog a couple of days where he's calling the Palestinian people and the protests just victimizers, similar to how people have been doing with other movements in the last couple of years, whether it be Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ movement. I don't think we can combine this situation with those. And that's a separate discussion I don't want to get into right now, but that's just my view, that we shouldn't be blurring the lines on that. Yeah, speaking of eliciting emotional responses, same with October 7th. We haven't been able to see or any proof of some of the claims, and I'm not saying it's not true, but to say there were 40 babies beheaded and grandmas were abducted and killed or taken in as hostages, that again to me is illicit in emotional response from another subsect of the population to justify what's happening. So again, we have to be very careful with the words that are being used and the information that's being portrayed. Yeah, and then again, so very similar to that, the media keeps saying it's the Israeli war against Hamas. Israeli war against Hamas, and Hamas has been painted as this terrorist organization. So again, it's trying to elicit a specific response from the people that, hey, this is a war on terror. This is not just civilians dying. We're trying to get to the terrorists. So, which leads me into my next point is, where are the numbers? Like, I mean, it's been 2 months. Where are the results? How many Hamas members have been killed? There isn't a specific number. And when you see a lot of the people come on, like even Piers Morgan, they can't state how many they've killed and how many are more to go. Now, I've worked in a professional environment, and if I was being given $4 billion a year, I would need to produce certain results. I wouldn't be given a very, yeah, I mean, I'd be on a tight leash to produce results and come back with numbers. In fact, I don't even get paid that much. I'd say probably a very, very small fraction of that, and I'm still expected to provide results within a couple of months. So again, just people need to start questioning these things, right? So just putting that out there. I mean, in fact, the US and North America will pick on athletes. You know, if an athlete's making $5 million, whether he's a basketball player or hockey player, and if he's not producing results, if he's not putting up the numbers, the audience or the fans are on that person's case, especially if he's making like millions and millions of dollars. So why does the US population or North American population have such high standards for athletes whom they choose to support and go watch, whereas the same level of scrutiny is not being applied to this military operation? Just blows my mind. Yeah, and then I mean they're getting paid the same, like I said, $4 billion a year, but there's been no explanation of how this sophisticated military was infiltrated on October 7th. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Um, but yeah, last couple points. So I mean, again, the media is talking about this persecution against the Jewish people, but there's been no talk, and they, again, they've made it, they're trying to make it into a religious thing, and they're talking about Muslims, but the Muslim people have been persecuted since the beginning of time. If you go and read about the Prophet Muhammad's, peace be and blessings upon him, his life, when he first was having that movement of Islam, he had to actually leave his home city of Mecca and move to Medina, and he was constantly being attacked and persecuted, and um, he had certain treaties with the Jewish people who turned against him, and at the last moment, and often um, yeah, like would renege on their agreements. So this persecution piece, I think, again, timeline wise, it's convenient, but if we're going to talk about things, we need to consider everything holistically. The last piece I will talk about, again, because we're just on the religious subject, because there's conversation about Islamic militants, terrorism, extremism. I came across the New Testament and I think it's over here. Yes. So the Deuteronomy. I'm just going to read the whole passage from Deuteronomy, and then kind of leave it up to you guys to decide. But when thou comest nigh unto a city to fight against it, then proclaim peace unto it, and it shall be. If it make thee answer a peace, and upon unto thee, then it shall be, that all the people that is found therein shall be tributaries unto thee, and they shall serve thee. And it will make no peace with thee, but will make war against thee. Then thou shalt besiege it. And when the Lord thy God had delivered it unto thine hands, thou shalt smite every male thereof with the edge of the sword. But the woman and the little ones and the cattle and all that is in the city, even all the spoil thereof, shalt thou take unto thyself, and thou shalt eat the spoil of thine enemies, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Thou shalt do Yeah, thou shalt thou do unto all the cities which the Lord thy God doth give thee for an inheritance. Thou shalt save alive nothing that breatheth, but thou shalt utterly destroy them, namely the Hittites and the Amalekites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that they teach you not to do after all their abominations, which they have done unto their gods. So should ye sin against the Lord your God. So, I mean, pretty obvious what's being said there, and that's kind of the angle there's peaking where the claim is being made that that's the Jewish people's land, and the justification around all the deaths. So yeah, those are some of my thoughts that I wanted to share. Again, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. I don't, nor will I claim to, but when I look at some of this information and go through it and try to understand, there's a lot of things that don't add up or make sense to me. So I just wanted to share that information, and if anyone wants to have a dialogue, I'm happy to talk and learn and educate myself further. I will be reading the in the next few days, the 100-Year War on Palestine by Rachid. Can't remember his last name, but anyways, I'll put that in the comments too. So thanks for listening.